Hey, welcome to Her Authentic Journey, the podcast. I am your host, Navasia Collier, woman, soon-to-be wife, mother of 3, and the former strong, independent woman. Along my journey, I discovered the secret key to the more in life is in your authenticity. This podcast is about becoming unstuck in who you thought you had to be as a strong, independent, maybe the responsible one, and become who we were meant to be. Myself and other resilient guests will share what we only wish someone shared with us early on. Topics, tips, lessons learned and unlearned while on our personal journeys of becoming true to who we are, not who we've had to be. Now, this purposeful, resilient life that you and I are meant for not only requires authenticity, it is also intentionality. Steering you away from just pushing and getting through life, we believe in the Method on Purpose roadmap of mindset, environment, time, honesty, obstacles, and the doing all work together to begin designing a life that is and feels more purposefully fulfilled, a life you actually love. So tune in, come along, join our Facebook community, and begin your authentic journey today. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Her Authentic Journey, the podcast. I am your host, Navasia Collier, and today we have a guest, Miss Taylor Jackson. Now, Taylor Jackson is the founder of Child Arise, a ministry dedicated to empowering the sleeping girl inside of women to arise. She uplifts women by cultivating an environment that allows them to fully be seen and heard no matter where they are on their path. And sharing her own story of overcoming over 10 years of built-up trauma, teenage motherhood, depression, and burnout, Taylor models a life where she has reclaimed her purpose for God's glory. Her program empowers women to tap into who they were created to be before the world told them who they could or couldn't be, to live a life of overflow rather than pouring from empty, and to love themselves wholly and feel worthy of everything they were created for. With over 16 years in leadership roles and 8 years of mentoring, Taylor is unwaveringly dedicated to helping women walk boldly and unapologetically in their purpose by helping them surrender the need to be everything to everyone and nothing to themselves. So, hey, Taylor, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, tell us where you're from and a little bit more about who Taylor is.
Yeah, I am from Phoenix, Arizona. Pretty much lived here my entire life, but pretty much have just been like the strong, independent woman since I was born, honestly. I know that probably sounds real cliche, but I was running down the street at 9 months old and telling my mom at 13 months that I needed to use the bathroom. And she was like, "Girl, you have a diaper on." um, and growing up, just like always the captain of my teams and quickly into management and leadership roles. And so in 2018, I was managing apartment complexes. I was a single mom. I know our story is pretty similar as it relates to that. I had my daughter at 18 as well. And was serving in church, like in multiple roles. So just kind of pouring in every aspect of my life until I had nothing to give anymore. And I just pretty much quit everything and moved to my parents' guest house in Colorado for about a year and a half, just to really heal and sit at the feet of Jesus, and learn who he created me to be so that I could stop being the doer and the people pleaser,
Absolutely. Yes. You did mention that the strong, independent woman, it's very cliche. Yes, it is. However, I think there's a lot of us out there, and we don't really hear too many people speak about the strong, independent woman and how it actually looks and how it actually feels, right? On the inside, it's always how we present ourselves and how we may show up to the world. So right. This is what this podcast is about. This podcast is about shedding light on women in their real stories, in their real journey, right? Of unbecoming everything they thought they had to be and then becoming the woman that, she was meant to be. I believe this is something that I needed early on in my life because, like you said, you had hit a moment you had to do something different. You did the thing until you couldn't do it anymore, right?
Right.
So this is what this platform is about. It's about giving the insight, giving the real, bringing up the topics and discussions that we rarely speak about, at least out loud, or that we're allowed to. We may show up and people may pour there are things on us, but we don't necessarily have that space where we can pour
Absolutely.
out and just be vulnerable. So I want to ask you about your journey. You said you did what you could do until you could do it no longer. So let us know a little bit more about that journey.
Yeah. So, like I said, I was serving in all those capacities, and this was in 2018. So I was about 26 and my daughter was 7 at the time. As a single mom, you already have this whole full-time job, right? And on top of that, I'm serving in all these other capacities. So I'm an armor bearer at church. I'm leading a young adult ministry. I'm teaching junior high and high school, and I'm mentoring all these people and teaching them about identity and self-worth and everything. But I didn't know my own. And so as I'm pouring, I'm just like, no one's refilling into me, which is, like you said, this platform, like no one is really pouring into the strong one. We're always the ones who are giving to everybody else, but no one's checking for us. And so I was in that space, right? Like I was in my church serving in this capacity, but we moved about 45 minutes away for a job opportunity. And I was still commuting that 45, 50 minutes twice a week to continue to serve and pour, and then would go back to our other side of town and have no one giving back to me. And I finally just stopped showing up everywhere. I locked myself in my apartment in the dark and I would pray that the Holy Spirit would put my daughter to sleep at night, because I didn't even have the capacity for that. And I didn't care that no one was checking for me, because I didn't have the capacity to give them my I'm okay answer. That was my biggest thing, is when you go places, people are like, hey, how are you? Like that's their greeting, but they walk past you so fast that you don't even have time to give a true answer. Right. And that became my biggest pet peeve, because I was like, you don't care and I'm not okay. And I don't have the capacity to tell you I'm not okay, but I don't have the capacity to lie anymore. And so the only place I would go is work, because that's a requirement, especially as a single mom.
Exactly.
But I would wake up as late as possible, bring her to school, get her as late as I could, hit a drive-through or something on the way home, because I wasn't trying to cook or do anything else. And like I said, just pray that the Holy Spirit would put her to bed. And like finally one day I was sitting in my office with my boss, who's also my mentor. And I managed an apartment complex, but I was there by myself. So she would just stop in probably once a week to, check in on the property, see how we're doing. And by the end of our meeting of running the reports and doing all that stuff, she asked me a question, and it was the most basic question, but I know she had no idea. And I had no idea that it was going to change my life, because she said, how's Lila doing? And Lila is my daughter. And she was not doing well. She was about to get kicked out of school for her behavior. And we had just found out that she experienced her own trauma that triggered my childhood trauma and the 10 years that built up after that. And so I just broke down crying when she asked that. And she looked at me like super wide-eyed, like, what is happening? Because I had on this mask until that point. And she had no idea that I was struggling in this capacity, And so I explained to her, Lila wasn't doing well. I wasn't doing well. I was in counseling. I was depressed. Like I was really struggling. And by the end of this conversation, we're both in tears. And she was like, do you have anyone that can help you? And my immediate answer was no, because again, as the strong one, I can help myself. No one's checking for me. And I got it. I've always had it. This is no different. But the truth was, like I said, my mom had moved to Colorado a couple years earlier, and they had 11 acres of property on the side of a mountain. And they had this guest house that was a garage that they turned into a studio. And my mom had been telling me I could come there because she knew I was struggling. And so that day I gave my 2 weeks notice, and my parents came down for Thanksgiving, and they hauled our little baby U-Haul up there to their house. And for a year and a half, I just locked myself in that guest house, because I'm again, born and raised in Arizona, very much a city girl. And my daughter's like my mom. She's outdoors, horses, ranch life. And so she was out with my mom and I just hibernated because it was their worst winter in 10 years, and really just allowed God to show me who I was, and not the version of me that was the broken, struggling version, because I knew that version. He was showing me who I was as his daughter, as his friend, as redeemed, as healed, as who he truly created me to be. And that was what I needed in that moment, because it allowed me to learn that authentic version of myself, that true version of myself, where I didn't have to people please. I didn't have to be or do or prove that I was worthy. I was able to just sit, in his arms and be whole.
Yes. That's such a freeing space to be in, even though, right, it begins in so much fear.
Yeah.
But yes, as you're describing it, yes, I know exactly what you mean. There's so much in what you said. There's so much. I want to go back to the point where you were asked about your daughter. And I want to get to that because as a mother, and those mothers that are listening, sometimes we can deal and hold in so much for ourselves, but it's usually our children. And when we see things shifting in our children that we either don't have the capacity for or the control over, is what sometimes breaks us, or it gives, we allow ourselves to be broken, I should say.
Right.
So I definitely understood when the vulnerability that you probably hit when that question was asked to you. I definitely, had a moment like that in my life. So I just wanted to shed light on that, and the fact that you did open up, and the fact that you found a safe space with your parents and you allowed yourself to have that time. So what emotions were you experiencing before you allowed yourself to have that moment and to just make changes?
Yeah, I think that, as that person who's always there for everyone, you can wear a mask for yourself, but you can't wear one for anyone else, especially your children.
Right.
And they are this mirror that we see, right? Like they're such a reflection of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to suppress all my trauma, right? Like I was able to be like, I can overcome this, that resiliency of get back up again, get back up again, get back up again. But when you see it start to cycle in your children, is a whole different thing, because you don't want them to ever experience those horrible things that you did. And so I was one who always would just suppress everything. Like, it's fine, just keep going. I have the capacity to carry it,
Right.
But once it happened to her, and once I saw her in that struggle, I realized that numbness is not healing. And me trying to put on this front like everything's fine was really just creating this like compact trauma, right? Like where all these things were just connected to each other. And I wasn't able to push anything down any further. Like it's almost like this visual in my head, right, is when your trash can is getting full and you can like push stuff down and keep piling stuff on to not have to put it out. That's really what we do to ourselves, right? Like, let me just keep compressing this, keep compacting this down until it's so full that it's like too heavy to carry. Like, how am I even supposed to bring this out, And so when my daughter started, like when I realized that she was struggling and she was in this space, like it literally broke everything, because it triggers what's inside of you, So her asking me that question, like, how is she doing? It was something that wasn't about me. And so I was able to break down and be vulnerable because the light wasn't shining on my head,
Right.
And even though she is that reflection of me, it was me being able to explain where she's at. And it was like this yes, I'm there too, without having to be the spotlight, if that makes sense.
Yes, it absolutely does.
So as a parent, I was in survival mode before I had her. So I don't have that story of like, when my daughter was born, she saved me in my life. I was living it for her and to help her. I don't have that. It wasn't until she was 7 or 8 that I was like, we got to switch this up. Like we got to really learn ourselves. We have to learn to heal these things, like it was way later on because I was in survival mode for a good 10 to 12 years. And it started, like I said, before I had her.
That is very deep. You were in survival mode before you had her. I can say I am the same. I was definitely in survival mode before I had my daughter. Yes. And I know a lot of other women, can relate to that. So I want to ask you, as you took your time and you gave yourself the grace to, allow yourself to heal, begin the healing process, begin to, recharge, and you mention uncovering your authentic self. So how have you defined authenticity?
I would say authenticity to me is like just being one of a kind, like there's no comparison. There's no proving myself. There's no people pleasing, which I had done for so long. I was this masked version of extrovert and I'm always there for you. And this yes person that people knew that they could rely on. But once I went through that healing journey, I was like, I'm actually extremely introverted. I love to be by myself. Like I can be extroverted. I can have conversations, but that refilling really comes in my alone time. And I didn't know that until I was probably 28. And so it's really just me being myself without having to be this person who's always on. And when I was, we moved in 2018. And so about 2019, I went to Florida and I didn't go with my daughter. I went by myself for about 12 days because I had this trip I had to go on. And it was the first time that I had been anywhere by myself because me being a single mom, it was just me. It was she and I. That's it. So I had her from when she was born forever. And so I went on this trip to Florida. And when I was driving while I was down there in the rental car, I realized like I get to do whatever I want right now. And I didn't know what that looked like. Like I didn't know what life looked like without having to think about somebody else and not just think about my daughter, but anybody. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, do I want the windows down? Mm-hmm. What music do I want to listen to? Am I hungry right now? Do I want to stay at the beach a little bit longer? What time do I want to wake up in the morning? Like the most basic questions of what I wanted, I had never asked myself before. And so to learn those things was what I learned as like my authentic self. If no one is relying on me, if no one's opinion matters, what at the core of who I am do I want to do right now? As basic as that sounds, do I want the windows down or not? Mm-hmm. Like that's this foundational piece of who am I? What things do I enjoy? I didn't know because I had never had the opportunity to sit in that space. And so going on that trip really revealed to me, like, what is the authentic version of myself, and to be able to be that introvert, to be able to show up for myself, to be able to make decisions that were what's best for me. Because when I'm my whole self and my full self, then I'm able to pour from this space of overflow rather than giving people my last and then being home at night exhausted after pouring all day and having nothing to show for it,
Right. Absolutely. I always say the strong, independent woman is one who shows up, but she crashes at the end of the night and wakes up with what sometimes feels like the whole world on her shoulders. It's really heavy. It's really, really heavy. But somehow we could find ourselves getting through it and showing up in a way that it is invisible to the eye. Right.
Right.
So yes, I definitely understand that those labels and the expectations of others, or just the roles that you have had to play in your life, can consume you, and it can layer over your true authentic self. There was a time that, like I was a teen mother as well, where if anybody asks who I am, I'm a mother.
Yep.
But outside of that, I would really have to put some thought to it, and there was a time where I didn't know who I was, and it wasn't until this journey that I uncovered a lot. Like you said, the little things tell a story about you. It really does. Right. And I really, on the journey, because I believe the journey, it's always unfolding. You're always learning a new version of you as you grow, the allowing yourself to grow instead of staying in the box, or, the tradition of who everyone else says that you are, or who you think everyone else needs you to be. Exactly. That's a big one too, especially as a mom. Yeah. So I'm glad that you touched on that. I know a lot of women resonated with that statement. I do want to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
Here on Her Authentic Journey, the podcast, we believe in the Method on Purpose roadmap. My Method on Purpose roadmap is basically the becoming unstuck in the person who you've had to be, right? It's the roadmap to begin to move in life, move and allow yourself to grow. So I want to ask you, along your journey or thus far, how has time factored along your journey?
Yeah, time is a huge one for me. And I love your method, because so many of the things, actually a lot of what you and I do is very similar, right?
Yes, it is.
And so a lot of your method is pretty similar to mine, because these things are so important for the strong woman. And time is a huge one for me, because that's one of the things that I teach is scheduling your life, right? So that they can live a fulfilled life and not just a productive one. And so for me, time has been huge, to slow down, to be intentional, and to not be so focused on doing that I'm not just being. And that's huge, right? In parenting, in business, in marriage. I know that you're engaged. I just got married a little over a year ago. And so I've really had to learn that same thing of just like being present with my family, being intentional with my time, and not be so focused on trying to be the best wife and the best mom and the best stepmom and the best,
right.
I don't have to prove myself to any of them, because they know who I am at my core. I'm able to just be in my home and be free. And so that time thing is so important to me, because every week I try to set my intentions for the week. At the end of the week, I try to do my reflections on what went well, what didn't, and just being sure to schedule in space, because as that person who's always there for everybody else, it's so easy to just say yes without considering what your schedule actually looks like. And so to create space in my schedule, to create space in the time that I have, has been a huge game changer, because it allows me to not freak out when things don't go as planned. Right. When something random pops up, I don't have to really worry about it, because I know that I've created that space in my schedule for myself, for things to go differently. And just knowing that like self-care isn't just like bubble baths and stuff, right? Like I had to create time and space to just, how am I feeling, to reflect, to allow myself, when my trauma triggers pop up, like to be able to process through that and not be so busy all the time that I don't have the capacity or the ability to walk through that. Because when you don't create that space, it just continues to build until you blow up, right? Right. And that's not healthy for anybody. So time is like probably one of the most important things that I've had to learn to master, so that I'm able to be the best version of myself.
Yes, I definitely agree with that, of course. Of course. Also, because the people that we love and that we care so much about, which is who we think about when we make these decisions, that's what they really want.
Right.
You know, we can have in our mind that we're supposed to do, but they really want to see us smile. They really want us to enjoy the moments that we have when we share it with others and as well as ourselves. Because if we spend our time more in a meaningful way, in a more valuable way for us, you know, we can show up a lot better, you know,
Right.
as ourselves and not be so drained and, you know, all the things that a strong woman
Yeah.
goes through, right? Okay, so my next question would be one piece of advice or words of wisdom that you would give to the woman you used to be.
Yeah. I got a couple for that one. You know, as you learn life lessons, it's just kind of, don't you wish you could go back and have conversations with the younger version of you? Like, could have saved so much time. But I would say the biggest one is probably that no one's opinion of you matters except for yours and God's. Because as that, like I said, I've been leadership my entire life, and that's because of the personality that I have. Like my mom is the exact same, my daughter's the exact same, of just being this bold, unapologetic, loud person. And that's not a personality that's for everybody. And so when you're younger, it's easy to be like, well, nobody likes me. And then you're trying to like prove yourself, right? Or shrink to fit what other people want. And I don't know if you follow Elise Myers on social media. She tells the funniest stories, but one of her like brand things now is go find less.
And I love that.
Yeah, right. And so to me, it's like no one else's opinion matters except for yours and God's. If you're too much for somebody, that's not your person. They can go find less. You don't have to shrink to be in the environments that you're called to be in. And when you learn to be that authentic version of yourself, regardless of what environment you're in, you're able to be less of a people pleaser, less of a yes man, yes of I have to pour into everybody else, and you can be your true authentic self. So I would just say, be you.
Absolutely. I love that. I love everything about that. I want to, of course, thank you for showing up and speaking to our strong woman and also serving a strong woman, right? As you know, I serve the strong woman as well. And I'm sure you notice that there aren't many women that target the strong woman specifically. Right. So I just want to give you kudos for that. I know it can sometimes feel like, we're on an island sometimes, even though the strong woman is so many things that, embodies the strong woman. There's so many different facets. I believe every woman is strong in her own way, in her own sense. So thank you for serving the strong woman as well. Because I know it can be hard because we're still unlearning as well. So I wanted to thank you for that. And if you can just let the audience know where they can find you, what they can expect from you, anything you want them to know.
Absolutely. So I most show up on Instagram and at Taylor Christian Jackson. And that's kind of like the main platform. My website is taylorcjackson.com. And I actually have a freebie that will be launching this week. It is called 7 Days of Surrender, and it's an audio devotional. So that will be free. It'll be on my website this week. So you can go ahead and download that, which I think is amazing if I don't say so myself.
Yes.
And I'll be,
absolutely.
yes. And then I'll be launching a small group coaching program that really kind of taps into that time space that we spoke about. And that will be in the next probably month or so. So right now it's going to be my website, Taylor C. Jackson. Download that freebie. And then on Instagram is where you can see me pretty much daily just to kind of show up and help. But I would just say that if you are the strong, independent one for everybody else, that you just need to know that a lot of times your strength can be found in weakness. and having those hard conversations, questioning the norm. It's okay to admit that you need help, I think, is the biggest thing. Like, that's not a weak space to be in. Admitting that you need help is the first step of true strength, is what I believe. So, there's people that are out there for you. You're seen, you're known, you're loved, and you do have people that are willing and able to support you, and you don't have to have any shame in that.
I love that. I love that. Thank you again.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I'm so proud of you for showing up for these women as well, because you know how much they need it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we are on the job, ladies.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you for listening to Her Authentic Journey, the podcast. I hope you enjoyed and were able to grab something meaningful from this episode. If so, please support by sharing with a friend, rate and review. You can also refer to our show notes for more. Until next time, remember, be true to who